It was a silent dawn, darkness covering the street in a heavy blanket, except for a familiar glow that immediately caught my attention. His car, parked casually in front of my house, seemed to mock my confidence, my dedication, the life we built together. I stood there, staring at that vehicle as if it were a bitter answer to questions I didn't even know I needed to ask. I didn't want to believe it, but reality was merciless. Something was wrong, and in that instant, I knew I couldn't just ignore it. The front door opened with a low creak, revealing a figure I knew so well but who suddenly seemed like a stranger. His rush to get down the stairs, his darting eyes, the way he held his coat to his chest. It wasn't a picture of someone who was making an innocent mistake. It was a furtive, calculated gesture. My heart started pounding, hands clenching into fists as she ran to her car and got in, as if fate had already decided for her. Without thinking twice, I got into my car and started following them, keeping the lights off, like a predator on the prowl. The silence in the vehicle was suffocating, filled only by the sound of my own thoughts spinning in circles. Is this what my life has become? I thought, my eyes fixed on the pair of taillights up front. It was as if every kilometer driven pulled me into an abyss, a place where I didn't want to be, but which was impossible to avoid. They stopped in front of a place that seemed abandoned at first glance, an old, dark building surrounded by irregularly parked cars. But as I got closer, I noticed the muffled music, the colored lights escaping through the cracks in the windows. A party, I thought, trying to understand how that made sense. The shock of seeing my wife there, walking through the door alongside another man, was almost unbearable. Not just the act itself, but the casualness with which she did it, as if respect for me, for our history, had never existed. I got out of the car and waited. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I felt like I needed more than just visual confirmation. My heart demanded answers even though my mind whispered that I didn't want them. Curiosity was a double-edged sword, cutting deep as I tried to understand what was happening inside that party. Suddenly, the door opened, and the man came out first, laughing, relaxed. Behind him, she appeared, laughing too, but with a look I barely recognized. It wasn't just a moment of infidelity. It was something more. Then, as I looked more closely at the group around them, something horrible hit me. She wasn't just with him. There was another person by her side, someone with whom she seemed too intimate, sharing gestures and looks that I believed were only ours. I remained still, my entire body tense. This was more than betrayal, it was a public spectacle, a blatant insult to what I held sacred. I took a deep breath and approached, keeping enough distance to not be noticed, but close enough to hear. His words echoed like venom, laughter that was once mine now shared with others. The shock was replaced by something darker, a cold rage that gripped every fiber of my being. Do you think he'll find out? I heard her say, her voice carrying a tone of sarcasm. Even if he finds out, he'll never have the courage to do anything. He's predictable, a good man, and that's why I'm here. The words were like sharp blades, cutting mercilessly. Was that what she thought of me? That I was weak, unable to act? My vision became blurred, but not from crying. It was boiling anger, the desire to confront, to scream, to demand explanations. But something held me back, an intuition that told me to wait, watch, gather whatever I would need to not only expose the truth, but make sure they felt the weight of what they had done. It couldn't end there. I walked back to the car, my hands shaking as I wrote down every detail in my mind. It wouldn't just be an argument or a confrontation. There would be consequences. They played with the wrong person, they underestimated my ability to react. What else was she hiding? How far did this betrayal go? How long had she been cheating on me without me even suspecting? I needed to know. As I drove home, I relived every moment, every word she had said. It was impossible to ignore the avalanche of feelings. Betrayal, humiliation, anger and, somewhere deep, a pain so intense it almost made me want to give up. But I wouldn't give up. I wouldn't give them the pleasure of seeing me defeated. That night, as silence filled the rooms of the house that now seemed empty, I decided I would go all the way. Not just to expose the truth, but to regain control of my life. Every step of hers, every decision she had made, would be undone. Her world, the one she built on lies and secrets, would fall apart. And in the midst of all this destruction, I would find a new way to live, one she could never achieve. But before that, I needed to find out who else was involved, what else was hidden behind that fake smile and those rehearsed gestures. Because one thing was clear, this was not the woman I loved. She was a stranger. And I was determined to reveal every bit of the truth, no matter how ugly it was. What I found at that party was just the beginning. Welcome to our channel. Here, we condemn any and all forms of betrayal. The stories you will hear are fictional, created to show how betrayal can destroy lives and relationships. Our goal is to bring deep reflections on trust, love, and the consequences of human choices. Get ready to dive into an intense narrative, full of exciting twists. We wish you a good story and we warn you, this one will be shocking. The morning started slowly at Lucas and Sophia's house. He, a 35-year-old man, shouldered the responsibility of keeping everything running. I was a manager at a technology company, a position earned with effort, many sleepless nights and a dedication that, at times, seemed infinite. Sophia, a little younger, was 32 years old and had exchanged a promising career in design to focus on her family, especially after the birth of Miguel, the couple's son, who was now 5 years old. To those who saw it from the outside, they were the portrait of a perfect life, a cozy home, a son full of energy and a marriage that seemed solid as a rock. Their routine was organized, almost predictable, but with touches of affection that still brightened their days. Lucas was the kind of man who always remembered to bring flowers on wedding anniversaries and left handwritten notes in the kitchen on random mornings. Sophia, in turn, reciprocated with small gestures of affection, a favorite dessert prepared in the middle of the week or an unexpected hug when Lucas arrived late from work. There was love, or at least it seemed like there was. However, the small details that were once a reason for laughter began to turn into reasons for silence. Sophia spent more time on her cell phone lately, but Lucas, always busy with his responsibilities, never questioned it. He preferred to believe it was conversations with friends or a new hobby project she had started. And when she said she was going to go out to take a breather, he just encouraged her, thinking it was a way to maintain her mental balance. He trusted. Trust, for Lucas, was not just part of marriage, but the foundation of it. And Sophia knew that. While Lucas worked hard, often taking work home, Sophia often felt isolated. Although she loved Miguel with all her heart, there were days when the routine of being a mother and housewife seemed suffocating. She missed something she couldn't clearly identify. Sometimes I would stare out the window as the sun set, imagining what life would be like if I had made different choices. But these thoughts were quickly replaced by the sound of the door opening, with Lucas entering tired, but smiling, as always. The setting where this story unfolded was a quiet residential neighborhood, surrounded by almost identical houses, tree-lined streets, and the occasional sound of children playing in the late afternoon. It was a place that, for many, seemed idyllic, but for Sophia, it sometimes felt like a prison. She would never admit it, not even to herself, but there was a restlessness inside her that not even the best moments with Lucas could dispel. Lucas, on the other hand, saw life differently. For him, stability was everything. He had grown up watching his parents struggle to keep up with their bills, and this had shaped his worldview. He wanted to provide Sophia and Miguel with a life that was not marked by deprivation. Working late, giving up travel and leisure time, it was all part of the greater plan to ensure a secure future for his family. And in her mind, Sophia understood that. On weekends, they tried to maintain the appearance of a united family. They were heading to the park, Miguel running from one side to the other, while Lucas and Sophia talked about light topics. Sometimes she would comment on the friends she had made on social media or a reading group she had started attending. He listened, always with interest, but without really catching the signs that something more was going on behind those words. Sophia started changing her wardrobe recently. Nothing drastic, just clothes that made her feel more confident, as she explained. Lucas noticed, but chalked it up to her wanting to feel good about herself. It was part of what he loved about her. Sophia always had this energy, this glow that made everyone around her feel good. He saw no reason to question it. In the house, everything was in place. Miguel was a happy, curious boy who loved asking questions about the world. Lucas was immensely proud of his son, and every achievement he made, no matter how small, was celebrated with enthusiasm. Sophia also had this pride, but sometimes she seemed lost in thought even during the happiest family moments. It was these little moments that made Lucas worried, but he preferred not to insist. "She's tired," he said to himself. The days passed at a steady pace, but something began to change almost imperceptibly. The conversations between Lucas and Sophia became shorter, less frequent. When he tried to share something about work or ask for advice, she seemed distant, as if she was thinking about something else. He noticed, but didn't say anything. She has the right to feel this way, he thought, justifying her behavior with her daily responsibilities. Sophia, in turn, felt trapped in a cycle of guilt and desire for something she couldn't name. There were days when she would look at Lucas while he slept, thinking about what a good man he was. She knew he was a great husband and a devoted father. And yet, that restlessness inside her didn't disappear. On their wedding anniversary, Lucas prepared a surprise. He booked dinner at a fancy restaurant and even hired a nanny to look after Miguel. Sophia was genuinely surprised, and for a moment, she seemed like the same woman he had met years ago. During dinner, they laughed, remembered stories and, for a moment, Lucas believed that everything was fine. But deep down, there was something different about her smile, something he couldn't identify. Meanwhile, Sophia looked at Lucas with conflicting feelings. She knew how hard he tried to keep them together, to create moments like this, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She wanted to tell him, but how could she tell him something that she herself didn't fully understand? Time marched on, and the fissures that had started as small cracks in the surface of their marriage now threatened to become something bigger. Lucas felt increasingly disconnected, but he didn't know how to change that. He believed that with patience and love they could overcome anything. What he didn't know was that sometimes the biggest threat isn't on the outside, but on the inside of those we love. Their house was still the same, but the atmosphere was different. There was an increasing silence, filled only by furtive glances and smiles that didn't reach the eyes. Lucas and Sophia were at a turning point, but neither of them seemed to know how to deal with it. For Lucas, love was what would keep them together. For Sophia, love was what made everything even more difficult. The days began to drag on for Lucas, increasingly filled with an uncomfortable silence that echoed in his mind. Conversations with Sophia became more automatic, almost as if they were both playing roles. He tried to ignore the uncomfortable feeling that was growing in his chest, but it was impossible. Something was changing, and he felt it in every gesture, in every word spoken without enthusiasm. The woman who had once been his confidant now seemed like a shadow of herself, distant, almost unreachable. Still, he clung to the idea that this was just a phase. All marriages faced challenges, right? That's what he repeated to himself, an attempt to stifle the growing discomfort. Sophia, on the other hand, felt like she was being swallowed by a wave of conflicting emotions. The days at home with Miguel were peaceful, but there was a latent restlessness that followed her like a shadow. At night, when Lucas tried to get closer, she tried hard to respond, but something inside her seemed to block her. It wasn't a lack of love, she told herself. It was the weight of something she couldn't name, but it still seemed to be eating away at the foundation of what they had built together. Every forced smile, every excuse for not being there, plunged her deeper into a whirlwind of feelings that she could barely control. Lucas began to notice small signs that kept him on alert, even though he tried to ignore them. Sophia's frequent outings, always justified as meetings with friends or reading group activities. The messages on her cell phone, answered quickly and accompanied by smiles he hadn't seen in a while. He wanted to believe, he wanted to trust, but doubt, like a seed planted in the soil of uncertainty, began to germinate. He tried to push those thoughts away, focusing on work and time with Miguel, but the feeling that something was wrong haunted him even in his dreams. One night, while Sophia was sleeping, Lucas felt an impulse he had never felt before. He knew it was wrong, that trust between them depended on transparency, but curiosity and distrust spoke louder. He took her cell phone from the side of the bed and, with shaking hands, unlocked the screen. There was nothing obvious there, no compromising messages, no suspicious names, but his recent call history showed a number he didn't recognize. It was a small detail, but enough to make him uneasy. He memorized the number before returning the cell phone to its place and returning to bed, feeling like a stranger in his own home. In the days that followed, Lucas couldn't get that number out of his head. He wanted to believe it was just a friend or someone from the book group, but doubt was like a slowly spreading poison. He searched for the number on social media and apps but found nothing. This only increased his paranoia, as if the universe itself was conspiring to keep him in the dark. The relationship with Sophia remained the same, superficial and without depth, and Lucas began to feel that he was losing something that he might never be able to recover. Then one night, while working late at home, he heard the muffled sound of the front door opening. Sophia had said she was going out to meet a friend, but it was too late for something so innocent. Lucas got up, barefoot, walking silently to the living room window. From there, he saw his wife quickly crossing the street, getting into a car he didn't recognize. The driver was nobody he had ever seen before. He felt a lump form in his throat, a mixture of pain and anger that left him unresponsive. He stood still for a few seconds, until instinct led him to grab his car keys and follow them. Driving that night was like going through a nightmare. He kept his distance, trying not to be noticed, but his heart was beating so hard that it seemed to echo inside the car. The tension was almost unbearable, and his mind was full of questions. Who was that man? Where were they going? And, more importantly, why was Sophia with him? He didn't want to jump to the most obvious conclusions, but reality was starting to become impossible to ignore. They stopped in front of an inconspicuous location, a house that seemed abandoned, but which, upon closer inspection, revealed dim lights and the sound of muffled music. Lucas parked the car and waited, watching as Sophia and the man got in together. He felt a heaviness in his chest, as if the air had been knocked from his lungs. Still, he knew he needed to go in. He needed to see with his own eyes what was happening. Inside, the place was a combination of flashing lights and excited voices, a stark contrast to the emptiness Lucas felt. He looked for Sophia in the crowd, and when he finally found her, it was as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. She was with that man, the two of them talking too close, laughing as if they were accomplices in something he would never understand. But what struck him as a final blow was the presence of another person beside her, someone who also seemed too intimate. It wasn't just one man, but two, and the way Sophia interacted with them both made it clear that something was very wrong. Lucas felt his vision blur as anger and pain took over. He wanted to confront them right then and there, but he knew he needed more than a public scene. He needed answers, proof, something to justify what he was feeling. Then he turned and left, his fists clenched and his heart in pieces. The betrayal was exposed, but the depth of it was something he still didn't fully understand. Lucas spent the night awake, his mind buzzing with images of Sophia at the party. Every detail of what he witnessed seemed etched into his memory with cruel precision, her smiles, the way she seemed so at ease around two men who weren't him. Pain was mixed with anger, but above all, there was a suffocating feeling of humiliation. He knew he needed to confront her, but he also knew that, first and foremost, he needed clear answers. It wasn't just the betrayal that consumed him, but what it meant. How long had this been going on? Who were they? Why had she done this? At dawn, Lucas saw Sophia enter the house with light steps, trying not to make any noise. He was already in the kitchen, waiting for her. When she saw him, she stopped in her tracks, surprised. He looked at her in silence, his face tense, his eyes filled with something that Sophia couldn't immediately decipher. It was more than anger or disappointment, it was something deeper, something that seemed to mix pain and determination. Before she could say anything, he spoke, his voice firm but low, carrying a tone she had never heard before. "We need to talk," he said, pointing to the table. Sophia hesitated for a moment, but realized there was no way to escape. She sat up slowly, hands shaking, trying to maintain her composure. Lucas didn't take his eyes off her for even a second. The silence between them was almost palpable, a barrier that seemed to grow with each passing moment. "Last night," he began, "I followed you. I saw where he went, I saw who he was with." Sophia's expression immediately changed. First it was surprise, then fear, and finally something that seemed to be a mixture of guilt and resignation. She opened her mouth to speak, but he interrupted her. "No. I don't want any excuses now. I want the truth. I want to know who they are and what it all means. I want to know why you destroyed what we had." His words fell like hammers on her. Sophia lowered her head, unable to meet Lucas's gaze. She knew there was no hiding it anymore. He tried to take a deep breath, but the guilt was overwhelming. Finally, in a weak voice, she began to speak. "I don't know where to start," he said, his eyes teary. It's not like you're thinking." She hesitated, searching for words, but Lucas had no patience for beating around the bush. "I saw you with them, Sophia. Don't tell me that's not what I'm thinking. I saw the way you were together. So please spare me any lies. I just want to understand why." She looked up, finally looking at him. "It's more complicated than you think, Lucas. I'm not trying to justify anything, but you need to know that one of them isn't just someone I met by chance." Her voice trailed off, and Lucas leaned forward, his fists clenched, trying to control the fury building inside him. "Then explain. Who is he? Why is he so important to you that he destroys our lives?" Sophia hesitated for a few more seconds, but then, as if tired of fighting the truth, she blurted out, her voice breaking, "One of them is Marcos, he's my ex-boyfriend." The shock went through Lucas like a physical blow. He knew that Sophia had a past, as everyone did, but the fact that she got back together with someone from his past without ever mentioning it left him floored. He took a deep breath, trying to process what he had just heard. "And the other one?" he asked, his voice now cold as ice. Sophia bit her lip, and tears began to run down her face. The other is his brother. They came to me months ago, saying they wanted to make things right, that they wanted to clear up something about the past, and I didn't know how to tell you that. I thought I could handle it on my own, but things got out of hand." Lucas laughed, but not in amusement. It was a bitter laugh, full of disbelief. "Did you expect to handle this alone? Dealing with them at parties, laughing, acting like what we have means nothing? How does that make sense, Sophia?" She started crying more intensely, trying to explain. "I didn't want it to be like this, Lucas. I thought I could keep it separate, that it wouldn't interfere with our marriage, but they manipulated me. They used things from the past, they threatened to expose something that I didn't want you to know." Lucas lay still for a moment, the weight of her words slowly seeping into his mind. "What did they threaten you with? What secret is so serious that you preferred to risk everything, including our family, to hide it?" Sophia shook her head, tears now falling without stopping. She seemed unable to respond, but Lucas wasn't going to wait any longer. He stood up, pacing the room, trying to control the anger burning inside him. "You need to tell me now, Sophia. Because right now, I'm about to walk out that door and never come back. She flinched at his words, but knew she had no choice. The secret he had kept for so long was now a bomb waiting to explode, and there was no escaping the consequences. She wiped away her tears with shaking hands and finally looked at Lucas. The secret they threatened to expose. Her voice trailed off again, and for a moment it seemed like she couldn't continue. But then, with visible effort, she took a deep breath and said, "It's about Miguel. They said they can prove you're not the father." The words hung in the air, as if time had stopped. Lucas stood frozen, staring at Sophia as if she had just turned into a stranger. The revelation hit him like an electric shock, a truth he could never have imagined. He tried to speak, but his voice wouldn't come out. All he could do was look at Sophia, waiting for her to say that this was a lie, that there was some explanation, but the look in her eyes said it all. The silence was deafening. Finally, Lucas found the strength to speak, his voice hoarse and full of pain. "So, that's it. Our whole life, everything we built, was it based on a lie?" Sophia tried to reach for his hand, but he pulled away, as if her touch burned him. "I never wanted you to find out like this, Lucas. I love you, and I always wanted to protect you and Miguel. But they showed up and started threatening, and I didn't know what to do." Lucas took a deep breath, trying to process the avalanche of emotions that consumed him. He knew this was just the beginning of what would be the most painful chapter of his life. Lucas remained motionless, as if the weight of Sophia's words had pinned his feet to the ground. The silence that followed seemed eternal, filled only by the distant sound of the wall clock in the room. He looked at Sophia, but he no longer saw her in the same way. She seemed like a stranger, someone he barely recognized. The revelation had ripped something out of him, something he hadn't even known was possible to lose. He finally broke the silence, his voice low but carrying an almost palpable intensity. "Are you saying that Miguel, that my son might not be mine? And you kept it a secret all these years? How, Sophia? How did you manage to look at me every day, knowing that?" She started crying again, but Lucas had no patience for her tears. He wanted answers, he needed them. "I didn't know how to tell you. When I found out I was pregnant, I no longer had contact with Marcos, and all I wanted was to start a life with you. You were so amazing to me, Lucas, and I thought maybe we would never have to face this. Miguel is yours, Lucas, no matter what the blood says. He is yours because you created him, because he loves you." Lucas gave a short, bitter laugh. "This isn't something you just decide, Sophia. You took away my right to know the truth, to make a choice. I deserved to know, from the beginning." Sophia tried to argue, her voice broken. "I was scared, Lucas. Fear of losing you, fear of destroying our family. Do you think it was easy for me? I lived with this fear every day, trying to compensate, trying to make everything work out. And then they appeared, Marcos and his brother, saying they knew about Miguel, that they had proof. They threatened to tell you everything, to destroy you. I didn't know what to do." Lucas began to walk around the room, hands in his hair, trying to find a way to process all of this. "And what did you do, Sophia? Did you give in to their blackmail? Is that why you were with them at that party? What were you doing there?" She hesitated, her face etched with guilt. "They asked me to meet with them. They said they wanted to resolve everything, that they didn't want to harm anyone, but I didn't trust them. I thought if I was there I could find out what they really wanted, maybe negotiate, but things got out of hand." Lucas stopped and looked at her, his voice gaining a firmer tone. "Negotiate what, Sophia? What could you possibly have to offer them? Don't lie to me, not now." She tried to look away, but Lucas didn't allow it. He moved closer, and the intensity in his voice made her shiver. "Did you sleep with him again? Or with both? And that? Is that what you did?" "No." Sophia screamed, tears flowing uncontrollably. I never did that, Lucas. Never after us. I just wanted to protect you, protect Miguel. I did everything wrong, I know, but I never betrayed you like that. Lucas took a deep breath, but his mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He wanted to believe her, but how could he, after everything he had heard? He needed air, needed to get out of there before he said or did something he might regret. He grabbed his car keys and headed for the door. I need to think, he said, without looking back. I don't know if I can look at you right now. Sophia ran to him, holding his arm, begging. Lucas, please don't go. Not now. Don't leave me like this. He pulled his arm firmly but without violence, looking at her one last time before leaving. You left me like this for years, Sophia. Now it's my turn. The door slammed shut, and Sophia collapsed to the floor, the sound of sobs filling the silence of the house. Lucas got into the car and drove aimlessly, his heart heavy and his mind flooded with thoughts. Every moment of the last few years flashed before his eyes, every smile of Miguel's, every night he believed he was living a true life. Doubt now gnawed at all of this, like a disease that could not be cured. He parked in a secluded spot, the car's engine still running, and leaned his head against the steering wheel. The pain was overwhelming, but in the midst of it, something began to emerge, a cold determination. He needed definitive answers, and there was only one way to get them. He took out his cell phone and dialed a number. Hello. The voice on the other end was clear and authoritative. Is it Marcos? The voice hesitated for a moment before responding. Yes, who is it? Luke. We need to talk. Now. The meeting was arranged in a discreet cafe, away from prying eyes. When Lucas arrived, Marcos was already there, sitting in a corner, with a look that alternated between disdain and nervousness. Lucas sat across from him, his eyes fixed on the man who was now the center of his storm. You know why I'm here, Lucas began, bluntly. I want to know the truth. No lies, no manipulations. I want to know what you want and what's really going on. Marcos smiled almost condescendingly, but there was something cautious about his behavior. I'm not here to cause problems, Lucas. I just want what's mine. The words made Lucas' blood boil. He leaned forward, voice low but full of menace. What is yours? Miguel is not something you can simply claim, as if he were a possession. He is my son. Always has been and always will be. Marcos shrugged, but his eyes betrayed a gleam of anger. Maybe it's better for everyone if you accept the truth. I didn't come here to fight, but I'm not going to disappear either. You know as well as I do that there's a chance he's mine. Lucas clenched his fists but remained in control. He needed to stay calm, he needed to get out of there with something concrete. And what do you intend to do with this, Marcos? Why did it appear now, after all these years? What do you really want? Marcos hesitated, as if considering his words. I want the truth to be recognized. I want to be part of his life, if it is proven that he is mine. You may not like this, but you can't stop me. Lucas was silent for a moment, staring at the man who now represented everything he feared losing. Finally, he took a deep breath and spoke, his voice filled with grim determination. You are sure? I can't stop you from seeking the truth. But if you're wrong, if Miguel isn't yours, I'll make sure you never come near my family again. Marcos looked at him, and the silence between them seemed to carry all the weight of the world. Lucas got up, leaving the money for coffee on the table, and left without looking back. He knew the next step would be the hardest, but he also knew he needed to face it. For the first time in years, he felt like control of his life was back in his hands, and he wouldn't let anything take it away from him again. Lucas drove home after meeting Marcos, but each kilometer seemed like an eternity. The conversation had revealed more than he was prepared to process. It wasn't just the possibility that Miguel wasn't his son, it was the fact that his entire life, his identity as a father, was being called into question by forces he couldn't control. The anger he felt towards Sophia, the frustration with Marcos, everything seemed smaller compared to the fear. The fear of losing what he valued most, his relationship with Miguel. Even amid the emotional chaos, one thing was clear to Lucas. He would do whatever was necessary to protect his son. Upon entering the house, the silence was heavy. Sophia was in the living room, sitting on the sofa, her hands clasped in her lap. She looked at Lucas with red eyes, as if she had spent hours crying. He stopped at the door, watching her. The woman he knew seemed more fragile than ever, but still there was something he couldn't forgive. The silence between them was long, almost unbearable, until Sophia tried to break it. His voice was low, hesitant, but filled with despair. "Lucas, I know I can't change what happened, but you have to believe that everything I did was because I thought I was protecting our family. I made a mistake, I know, but all I wanted was for things to work out for us." Lucas took a deep breath before responding. His voice was firm, but there was an underlying vulnerability, as if each word cost more than he could afford. "Protect our family? Do you think hiding something like this is protection? Sophia, I lived all these years believing in something that may never have been real. You had the right to tell me. I had a right to know." Sophia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know how. I was afraid of losing you, afraid that you wouldn't want to be here anymore if you knew the truth." Lucas laughed bitterly. "And now? Do you think hiding it made things easier? Because to me it looks like you just destroyed everything." She stood up, walking towards him with uncertain steps, as if she were stepping on glass. "Please, Lucas, tell me what I can do to fix this. I can't lose you, I can't lose our family." He took a step back, avoiding her touch. "I don't know, Sophia. Right now, I don't even know who you are. I need time, space, because right now all I can feel is anger. Angry that you made this decision for both of us, angry that I was deceived for so long." Sophia didn't insist. She knew that any attempt to defend herself at that moment would only worsen the situation. Lucas went up the stairs towards the bedroom, closing the door behind him. Inside, he sat on the edge of the bed, holding his head in his hands. Sophia's words echoed in her mind, but they couldn't silence her thoughts about Miguel. He knew he couldn't let this situation affect the boy. Regardless of what the tests might reveal, Miguel was his son. He had raised him, loved him, taught him to ride a bike, read him bedtime stories. None of this could be erased. The next morning, Lucas made a decision. He needed proof, needed to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. He scheduled a DNA test. When he told Sophia, she couldn't resist, just nodded sadly. She knew it was inevitable. Lucas tried to act normally with Miguel, but it was difficult. Every smile from the boy, every curious question, felt like a stab in his heart. He knew that Miguel was not to blame for anything, but the uncertainty consumed him. The days that followed were tense. Lucas and Sophia barely spoke to each other. The wait for the test results was unbearable, a countdown to something that could change their lives forever. Lucas began spending more time outside the house, driving aimlessly or immersing himself in work. He needed distractions, something to keep him from being consumed by anxiety. Sophia, in turn, tried to fill the void by taking care of Miguel, but the guilt followed her like a shadow. She knew that what was at stake was not just their marriage, but the future of their entire family. Finally, the day arrived. Lucas received a call from the laboratory informing him that the results were ready. He left work early and went straight to get the envelope. The way back home was a blur. He held the envelope in his hands, but he didn't have the courage to open it. When he arrived home, he found Sophia waiting for him in the living room. Miguel was in the room, playing. Lucas sat on the couch, the envelope between them like a physical barrier. "Do you want me to open it?" Sophia asked, her voice barely audible. Lucas shook his head. No. I do it. He took a deep breath before tearing open the envelope. His eyes swept over the words on the paper, and for a moment, he stood still. Sophia tried to read his expression, but he gave no clues. Finally, he dropped the paper on the sofa and looked at her. Miguel is my son. His voice was a mix of relief and exhaustion. Sophia started to cry, but this time, they were tears of relief. She tried to hug him, but he got up before she could get close. That doesn't change what happened, Sophia. It doesn't change the fact that you lied, that you deprived me of the truth. She nodded, tears still flowing. I know, Lucas. But maybe this will give us a chance to make things right. Lucas stared at her for a long moment before responding. I don't know if there's anything left to fix. He took the paper and went upstairs, leaving Sophia alone in the room. She knew that the road to recovering her marriage would be long, if that were still possible. Meanwhile, Lucas closed the bedroom door, sitting on the bed again. The confirmation that Miguel was his son brought some relief, but it also left him with a feeling of emptiness. He knew that the decisions he made in the coming days would shape not only his future, but Miguel's as well. And he couldn't allow the boy to be another victim of this chaos. Lucas spent the next few days in a state of deep introspection, trying to decide how to move forward. Miguel was his son, he knew that now, but Sophia's emotional betrayal and lies continued to hang like a heavy shadow. Every interaction with her was cold, distant. He responded only as necessary, and she, clearly devastated, did not insist. Lucas spent more time outside the house, looking for some kind of normality at work or on solitary walks. But the truth was that he felt lost, like he was trying to pick up the pieces of a life that had never been as solid as he believed. One night, while Miguel was sleeping and Sophia was trying to find something to occupy her mind in the bedroom, Lucas went down to the kitchen and looked out the window. The darkness outside seemed to reflect exactly what he felt. He heard Sophia's light footsteps approaching, and when she entered the kitchen, they both fell silent. Lucas finally broke the silence, his voice low, almost resigned. I made a decision. Sophia stopped, holding her breath, fearing what he would say next. I can't go on like this, Sophia. Not after everything that happened. There is no trust, and without that, there is no marriage. The words fell like a blow to Sophia, but she knew there was no way to argue. Guilt gnawed at her, and she understood that Lucas was not obligated to forgive her. Still, she tried one last time. Lucas, I know I made a mistake, but I love you. I love you and Miguel. If there is any chance of fixing this, please tell me. He shook his head slowly, his expression filled with pain. I loved you too, Sophia. Very. But now, every time I look at you, all I can remember is the lies, what you hid from me. I can't live like this, and I can't do this with Miguel either. He deserves to grow up in a healthy environment, without this burden between us. Sophia started to cry, but Lucas remained firm. He knew this decision was best for both of us, even if it was painful. In the following days, Lucas began to organize preparations for the separation. He made sure to be fair, ensuring that Miguel continued to have the best of both worlds, even though they were no longer together as a family. Sophia, although devastated, accepted the decision. She knew that what was left now was to focus on being the best mother possible for Miguel and, perhaps, try to rebuild herself. Meanwhile, Lucas found support where he least expected it. During a work meeting, he met Mariana, a new colleague who had recently been transferred to his team. Mariana was different. She was thoughtful, but also direct and sincere. There was something about his presence that brought a calm that Lucas hadn't felt in a long time. Initially, he kept his distance, still shaken by the end of his marriage, but casual conversations with her began to become a refuge. Over time, he found himself smiling again, laughing at simple things, something he didn't think would be possible so soon. One day, during a walk in the park with Miguel, Lucas met Mariana by chance. She was sitting on a bench, reading a book. Miguel, with his typical curiosity, went up to her and started asking her about what she was reading. Lucas approached, a little awkwardly, but Mariana smiled and started talking to Miguel as if she had known him for years. That touched something in Lucas. It was as if, for the first time, he saw a possibility of a fresh start, a chance to build something new. As Lucas moved on, Sofia also began to find a new path. After months of therapy, she was able to confront her past mistakes and understand the reasons that led her to make the decisions that destroyed her marriage. She began to dedicate herself to social projects and find purpose in helping others, especially women who faced similar dilemmas to hers. She knew she could never erase what she had done, but she could learn from it and try to be a better person. As for Marcos, he tried to keep in touch with Sofia, but she cut all ties. She finally realized that his presence in her life was toxic and that she owed him nothing. He, in turn, disappeared from their lives, unable to face Sofia's renewed strength and Lucas' determination to protect his family. Lucas and Sofia reached a cordial agreement regarding Miguel's custody. They made sure the boy never felt guilty or responsible for what happened. For Miguel, his parents were still his heroes, even if they no longer lived together. Lucas made sure Miguel grew up knowing he was loved unconditionally, no matter the circumstances. Over time, Lucas and Mariana began to build a solid relationship, based on trust and honesty. He knew that the past would always be with him, but he also knew that it was possible to start over. The love he felt for Miguel was unwavering, and it kept him strong on his journey to rebuild his life. Sofia, although alone, found peace in her new life. She learned that forgiveness begins with forgiveness itself and that rebuilding her dignity was more important than seeking redemption from others. She and Lucas were no longer partners, but they learned to co-parent, putting Miguel above their differences. In the end, they each followed different paths, but they all found something valuable, the strength to move forward. Miguel grew up in an environment where love was never lacking, even if the circumstances were different. And Lucas finally found a new chance to be happy, without lies or shadows from the past. What did you think of this story? Share your opinion in the comments, we want to know. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Here, we condemn any type of betrayal, and our goal is to show how choices can profoundly impact lives. Until the next story.